The forgotten warriors of Earth. Centuries ago, humans were revered as the ultimate warriors in the Galactic Federation. Engineered for adaptability, resilience, and sheer willpower, they were the perfect instruments of war. Their ability to innovate under pressure, combined with their indomitable spirit, made them indispensable in interstellar conflicts. But humanity's rise to prominence came with consequences. Ethical debates raged across the galaxies as sentient rights groups condemned the Federation for treating humans as mere tools. Under mounting pressure, the Federation Council passed a landmark resolution. Humanity was to be abandoned, isolated on their origin planet, Earth. The years turned into centuries, and Earth was forgotten by most of the galaxy. Once a bustling hub of human activity, it now stood as a relic of the past. Nature reclaimed its territories, cities crumbled, and the humans, left to their own devices, fell into obscurity. Little did the galaxy know, humanity's story was far from over. Commander Talon's routine check. Commander Talon, a high-ranking officer of the avian species, was tasked with conducting the routine millennial inspection of Earth. The avian were bird-like beings, their sharp talons and keen eyesight symbolic of their species' precision and pride. For Talon, this assignment was more of an inconvenience than a duty. Earth was seen as an unremarkable backwater planet, its inhabitants primitive and irrelevant to the grand schemes of the Federation. As Talon's sleek, silver ship descended into Earth's atmosphere, the commander couldn't help but marvel at the planet's beauty. Vast oceans glittered under the sunlight, dense forests stretched endlessly, and the skies were a brilliant shade of blue. However, the serene landscape did little to quell Talon's disdain. Why waste resources on this inspection? Talon muttered, adjusting the ship's controls. The humans are probably extinct by now. Landing in a clearing near a sprawling forest, Talon activated the ship's cloaking mechanism. The avian officer stepped out, scanning the surroundings with a sophisticated device. The readings were surprising. Not only were humans alive, but their numbers had grown significantly. More intriguing was the faint trace of energy readings, something far more advanced than the primitive tools the Federation had last observed. A silent observer. Unbeknownst to Talon, he was being watched. Hidden among the trees, a young human named Kale observed the alien figure with a mixture of awe and fear. Kale was a scout for his community, one of many small settlements scattered across the land. These humans were no longer the complacent beings the Federation had once known. Over generations, they had adapted to their isolation, rediscovering ancient technologies and forging new paths of survival. Kale's eyes widened as he recognized the emblem on the alien's uniform, a symbol his people had only seen in old, tattered records. This being was from the Federation, the very organization that had abandoned them. Clutching his communicator, Kale whispered into it, "Commander Lyra, we have an outsider." "Federation, what are your orders?" A crackling voice replied, "Do not engage. Observe and report back. If it's Federation, we need to know why they're here." Kale nodded, his heart pounding. The stories passed down through generations painted the Federation as a heartless entity, one that discarded humanity without a second thought. Yet curiosity burned within him. Why had they returned now? Human ingenuity unveiled. Talon continued his survey, unaware of the human presence. The commander's device beeped rapidly as it detected an anomaly nearby. Following the signal, Talon stumbled upon a hidden structure, a camouflaged facility blending seamlessly with the environment. Intrigued, the alien approached the entrance, only to be met with resistance. The burst of energy crackled through the air, and Talon narrowly avoided being struck. From within the facility, a mechanical voice boomed, "Unauthorized entity detected. Leave immediately." Talon's feathers ruffled in frustration. "Primitive defenses," he scoffed, deploying a small drone to disable the security system. But as the drone approached, it was swiftly intercepted by a human-built countermeasure, a net of electromagnetic pulses that fried its circuits. Talon stared in disbelief. This level of sophistication was unexpected. The humans were supposed to be primitive, yet here they were, displaying technological prowess that rivaled some Federation species. Realizing the situation required a more cautious approach, Talon activated his translator. "I come in peace," he announced, his voice echoing through the forest. "I am Commander Talon of the Galactic Federation. I mean no harm." There was a long pause before a response came. A holographic projection appeared before Talon, depicting a human figure. It was Commander Lyra, leader of the settlement. Her piercing eyes and determined expression conveyed strength and wisdom. "Galactic Federation," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. "The same Federation that abandoned us centuries ago. Forgive me if I'm not inclined to trust you." Talon straightened, trying to maintain authority. "I am here on a routine inspection. The Federation has no hostile intentions toward your people." Lyra smirked. "Routine, you say?" After a millennium of silence. "Your timing is suspicious, Commander. What does the Federation want with us now? The hidden agenda?" Talon hesitated. The truth was, the Federation had little interest in humanity. This mission was a formality, a box to be checked off. But there was another reason for Talon's unease. Recent intelligence reports hinted at a rogue alien fleet operating near Earth's sector. If true, humanity could be in grave danger. However, revealing this information could complicate matters. "I am merely following orders," Talon replied diplomatically. "My goal is to assess your species' progress and report back." Lyra's hologram flickered, her expression unreadable. "Progress? You mean whether we've survived your abandonment? Let me make this clear, Commander. Humanity doesn't need your Federation. We've thrived despite your betrayal." Before Talon could respond, a loud alarm blared from the facility. Lyra's face turned serious. "We've detected an unidentified fleet entering our atmosphere. If this is your doing, Commander, I suggest you leave now." Talon's heart sank. This wasn't the Federation's doing. The rogue fleet was here. The ambush begins. Above Earth's skies, dozens of alien ships appeared, their metallic hulls gleaming ominously. These were not Federation vessels. Their designs were angular and aggressive, radiating hostility. Talon's communicator crackled as his ship's AI reported, "Incoming hostile forces. Recommend immediate evacuation." But Talon didn't move. For the first time, he felt a sense of responsibility for the humans. Abandoned or not, they were a part of the galaxy's fabric, and leaving them to face this threat alone felt wrong. "Commander Lyra," Talon said urgently, "these ships are not Federation. They are a threat to both of us. Let me help." Lyra's hologram flickered again, her expression softening slightly. "Help? Why would you risk your life for us?" Talon paused, then said with conviction, "Because it's the right thing to do." Lyra studied him for a moment before nodding. "Very well, Commander. Let's see if your Federation training is worth anything. Follow my lead." As the alien fleet began their descent, humanity and their unexpected ally prepared for the fight of their lives. This battle would not only determine Earth's fate, but also reveal the true strength of a species once forgotten. The battle for survival begins. The atmosphere crackled with tension as the alien fleet descended toward Earth. Their ships were monstrous, each a jagged nightmare of metallic edges and bristling weaponry. From their ominous hum, it was clear they were designed for one purpose: destruction. These were the Vekar, a race infamous for raiding defenseless planets and enslaving entire civilizations. For centuries, the Vekar had been a whispered legend, a scourge avoided even by the Galactic Federation. Commander Talon stood near the hidden human facility, staring into the sky. His mind raced as he analyzed the situation. The Vekar fleet wasn't just here for a simple raid. The sheer number of ships indicated they intended to obliterate any resistance and claim Earth as their own. Humanity's defiant resolve. Inside the facility, Commander Lyra and her team were already in action. The control room buzzed with activity as holographic displays projected the Vekar fleet's trajectory. Young engineers and tacticians worked tirelessly, their faces etched with determination. Despite their isolation, humanity had built a robust defense network. It wasn't on par with the Federation's technology, but it was innovative, cobbled together from ancient scraps and human ingenuity. "Commander," Kel reported as he entered the room, "the Vakar fleet is deploying ground units near Sector 17. They're likely targeting our energy cores." Lyra nodded, her eyes fixed on the central display. "They'll aim to cripple our infrastructure first. If they take the cores, we lose our defenses. We can't let that happen." She turned to Talon, who had been observing the scene with quiet awe. "Commander Talon," she said, her voice sharp, "if you're serious about helping, now's the time to prove it. Do you have combat experience?" Talon straightened, his pride flickering to life. "I've led countless missions in the Federation's Vanguard fleet. I'm more than capable." Lyra's gaze was skeptical but unwavering. "Good. Then you'll lead a strike team to Sector 17. We need to hold that position at all costs. Kel will go with you." Kel's eyes widened, but he nodded resolutely. "Understood, Commander." A new alliance. Talon and Kel moved swiftly, accompanied by a small squad of human fighters. They were armed with energy rifles and makeshift armor, their weapons a testament to humanity's resourcefulness. As they approached Sector 17, Talon noticed the landscape, a sprawling field of solar panels and wind turbines surrounded by dense forest. The energy cores were hidden beneath this network, camouflaged to blend with the environment. "This is impressive," Talon admitted as they set up defensive positions. "Your people have done well to survive." Kel glanced at him, his expression unreadable. "We didn't survive. We evolved. The Federation thought they left us to die, but we used the scraps they abandoned to build something better." Talon felt a pang of guilt but said nothing. He knew the Federation's abandonment was a stain on its history, and now he was witnessing the consequences firsthand. Suddenly, the ground trembled as Vakar dropships landed nearby. The sleek, black vessels hissed as their doors opened, releasing hordes of heavily armed soldiers. The Vakar were a terrifying sight. Towering figures clad in obsidian armor, their faces hidden behind angular helmets. Their weapons pulse with an eerie red light, a chilling contrast to the natural beauty of the forest. "Positions," Talon barked, his military instincts taking over. "Hold the line." The human fighters responded immediately, taking cover behind makeshift barricades and trees. As the Vakar advanced, Talon activated a wrist-mounted device, deploying a translucent energy shield that shimmered in the sunlight. The first clash. The battle erupted with a deafening roar. The Vakar opened fire, their plasma bolts scorching the earth. Talon's shield absorbed the initial barrage, but he knew it wouldn't last long. "Return fire," he shouted, and the humans responded with precision, their energy rifles lighting up the battlefield. Kel proved to be a skilled marksman, taking down several Vakar with well-placed shots. "They're tougher than they look," he muttered, ducking behind cover as a plasma bolt narrowly missed him. Talon admired the humans' bravery. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, they fought with a ferocity that rivaled any Federation soldier. He couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Perhaps humanity was more than just a forgotten relic of the past. As the battle raged on, Talon noticed a pattern in the Vakar's movements. They were focusing their efforts on a single point, attempting to breach the facility's outer defenses. "They're targeting the main conduit," he realized. "If they destroy it, the cores will overload." He turned to Kel. "We need to cut them off. Can your people hold this position?" Kel nodded. "We'll manage. Go." Talon sprinted toward the conduit, weaving through the chaos. His avian physiology gave him an advantage, his agile movements making him a difficult target. When he reached the conduit, he found a group of Vakar soldiers planting explosive charges. Without hesitation, he activated his wrist blaster, taking them down with pinpoint accuracy. But more Vakar were on the way. Talon's communicator buzzed as Lyra's voice came through. "Talon, what's your status?" Conduit secured for now, he replied, but we need reinforcements. Hold your position, Lyra said. We're sending a drone squad to assist. The turning point. Back at the facility, Lyra monitored the battle with grim focus. The humans were holding their own, but it was clear they couldn't sustain this level of resistance for long. The Vakar were relentless, their superior numbers threatening to overwhelm the defenders. Commander, one of her officers reported, we've detected a large energy signature. The Vakar mothership is powering up its main weapon. Lyra's blood ran cold. The Vakar's mothership was a floating fortress, and its main weapon was capable of leveling entire cities. If they fired it, Earth's defenses would crumble in an instant. Options, she demanded. The officer hesitated. We could try to overload their weapon systems, but we'd need to deploy a high-energy pulse directly into their ship's core. Lyra frowned. It was a risky plan, but it might be their only chance. Prepare the pulse, she ordered, and contact Talon. He'll need to coordinate the strike. An unlikely hero. Talon's communicator crackled as Lyra explained the situation. You'll need to get close to the mothership and deploy the pulse manually. Can you do it? Talon hesitated. The mission was dangerous, suicidal, even, but as he looked around at the human fighters risking their lives, he felt a surge of determination. These people deserved a chance. They deserved to survive. I'll do it, he said, but I'll need a pilot. Kale stepped forward. I'll go with you. You'll need someone who knows the terrain. Talon nodded, grateful for the young scout's courage. Together, they'd boarded a small human-made ship, its cobbled-together design a testament to humanity's resilience. As they ascended toward the Vakar mothership, Talon couldn't help but feel a newfound respect for the species he had once dismissed. This isn't just about survival, he realized. It's about proving that humanity is worth remembering. The final approach. As the ship approached the mothership, Talon and Kale prepared for the final phase of their mission. The Vakar were relentless, but so were the humans. This battle would determine the fate of Earth, and perhaps the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. Into the heart of the enemy. The human-made ship shuddered as it ascended through Earth's atmosphere. Talon and Kale sat in the cockpit, their expressions tense but resolute. The patchwork vessel, nicknamed the Phoenix, was a testament to human ingenuity, a blend of scavenged alien technology and repurposed Earth materials. Its engines whined under the strain, but it held steady. Cal's hands gripped the controls tightly. This ship wasn't built for stealth, he muttered, glancing at the radar. The Vakar will detect us before we even get close. Talon leaned forward, studying the glowing holographic map on the dashboard. We don't need stealth, he replied. We need speed. Keep the thrusters at maximum and head straight for their exhaust vents. They'll never expect us to approach from such a vulnerable point. Kale raised an eyebrow. You're betting that they won't think we're bold enough to fly directly into their engine systems? Talon smirked. Exactly. Kale let out a dry laugh. This might be the craziest thing I've ever done. Good, Talon said, fastening his harness. It's the crazy ones that change history. A dangerous flight. As the Phoenix approached the Vakar mothership, its size became fully apparent. The ship was a behemoth, nearly the size of a small moon. Its surface bristled with weaponry and shimmering energy shields. Swarms of Vakar fighters patrolled the perimeter like an impenetrable wall of steel. Alarms blared inside the cockpit as the Vakar fleet detected their approach. Red warning lights flashed, and the radar was suddenly filled with hostile signatures. They see us, Kale shouted, gripping the controls. Talon's voice was calm but firm. Keep us steady. Activate the decoy drones. Kale pressed a series of buttons, and a dozen small, spherical drones ejected from the ship's hull. The drones scattered in every direction, emitting false energy signatures to confuse the Vakar sensors. Almost immediately, the enemy fighters broke formation, chasing after the decoys. It's working, Kale said, his voice tinged with disbelief. Talon's gaze remained fixed on the mothership. "Don't celebrate yet. We're not out of the woods." The ship veered sharply as Kale dodged incoming plasma bolts. The Vakar's long-range cannons began to fire, their massive beams of energy lighting up the void of space. Each shot narrowly missed the Phoenix, but the sheer force of the blasts shook the ship violently. "I hope you're good at improvising," Kale yelled over the noise. "Trust me," Talon replied, gripping the edge of his seat. "I've faced worse odds than this." The entry point. After a series of hair-raising maneuvers, the Phoenix finally reached the exhaust vents of the mothership. The colossal structure loomed before them, its engines emitting a blinding orange glow. The vents were surrounded by a labyrinth of piping and metallic structures, creating a narrow and treacherous entry point. "This is it," Talon said. "Bring us in close, and cut the engines once we're inside." Kale nodded, his hand steady despite the chaos. With expert precision, he guided the ship into the exhaust vents, narrowly avoiding the scorching heat of the engine flares. The interior of the vent was a maze of twisting tunnels, lit only by the flickering light of the ship's dashboard. "Engines offline," Kale reported as the ship came to a halt. "We're officially running on borrowed time." Talon unfastened his harness and grabbed a small device from his belt. It was a high-energy pulse generator, compact but powerful enough to disable the mothership's main weapon systems. He handed a second device to Kale. "We'll need to split up," Talon said. "The pulse needs to be deployed in 2 separate locations to create enough interference. You'll take the upper level, and I'll handle the core." Kale hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "Got it. What's the backup plan if something goes wrong?" Talon gave him a grim look. "There isn't one." Navigating the mothership, the 2 men exited the ship, their movements cautious but deliberate. The interior of the mothership was a stark contrast to its menacing exterior. The walls were smooth and reflective, pulsating with an eerie blue light. Strange, alien symbols lined the corridors, and the air was thick with an unnatural hum. Talon activated a holographic map on his wrist device, studying the layout. The core was heavily guarded, as expected, but there were maintenance shafts that bypassed most of the main security zones. "Stay quiet and move quickly," Talon whispered to Kale. "If you encounter resistance, don't engage. Just keep moving." Kale nodded, his expression determined. "Good luck, Commander." "You too," Talon replied, before heading toward the lower levels. As Talon navigated the labyrinthine corridors, he couldn't help but marvel at the Vakar's technology. Despite their brutality, they were undeniably brilliant engineers. The mothership was a masterpiece of design, its systems perfectly synchronized to maximize efficiency and power. But admiration quickly gave way to urgency as Talon encountered his first patrol. A group of Vakar soldiers marched down the corridor, their heavy boots echoing against the metal floor. Talon pressed himself against the wall, his heart pounding. He activated his cloaking device, rendering himself nearly invisible. The soldiers passed by without noticing him, their guttural voices speaking in an alien tongue. Once they were gone, Talon continued his descent, his every step calculated and silent. Kale's challenge. Meanwhile, Kale reached the upper levels of the ship. The area was less guarded but no less dangerous. The walls were lined with energy conduits, and the air crackled with static electricity. Kale's task was to plant the first pulse device near the ship's communication array, a critical component of its weapon systems. As he approached the array, Kale's communicator buzzed. "Kale, this is Talon. Status." "I'm in position," Kale whispered, planting the device now. He knelt beside the array and carefully attached the pulse generator to its surface. The device emitted a soft hum as it activated, its lights blinking in sequence. "Device is live," Kale reported, moving to the extraction point. But before he could leave, an alarm blared, and the corridor was flooded with red light. Kale's heart sank as Vakar soldiers appeared at the far end of the hallway, their weapons drawn. "They found me," Kale shouted into his communicator. "Hold your position," Talon's voice replied. "I'm almost done here." Kale gritted his teeth and raised his rifle. No promises. Talon's sacrifice. Talon reached the core, a massive chamber filled with swirling energy and rotating machinery. The air was hot and oppressive, and the sound of the machinery was deafening. He located the central power node and quickly attached the second pulse device. "Device is live," he reported. "Kale, get out of there. I'll cover you." Cal's voice crackled through the communicator. Easier said than done. Talon activated his wrist blaster and sprinted toward Cal's location. He encountered several Vakar soldiers along the way, dispatching them with ruthless efficiency. His Federation training had prepared him for moments like this, but the stakes had never been higher. When he reached Kale, the young scout was pinned down behind a fallen beam, his rifle nearly depleted. The corridor was swarming with Vakar soldiers, their weapons lighting up the space with deadly plasma fire. "Stay down," Talon shouted as he charged into the fray. He activated his energy shield and unleashed a barrage of fire, drawing the Vakar's attention. "Go, Kale," Talon yelled. "I'll hold them off." Kale hesitated, his eyes filled with guilt. "I can't just leave you." "Don't argue," Talon roared. "Get back to the ship and finish the mission." With a reluctant nod, Kale retreated, leaving Talon to face the Vakar alone. As the young scout disappeared into the shadows, Talon turned to face the enemy, his resolve unshaken. "This is for Earth," he muttered, gripping his weapon tightly. "And for redemption." The pulse devices activated moments later, sending a massive shockwave through the mothership. The Vakar's systems flickered and failed, their main weapon rendered useless. Talon's final stand had bought humanity the time it needed to strike back. The turning point. The shockwave from the pulse devices rippled through the Vakar mothership like a tremor shaking a planet's core. Lights flickered and dimmed, and the omnipresent hum of the alien ship's energy systems faltered into an uneasy silence. For a moment, the mighty Vakar vessel seemed vulnerable, a rare sight that no human had ever witnessed before. But it came at a cost. Kale stumbled through the labyrinthine corridors, his chest heaving from exertion. The distant sounds of gunfire and explosions echoed in his ears as he clutched the communicator in his hand. "Talon." Kale's voice cracked with desperation. "Commander, do you copy?" "Talon." Static was his only response. Kale clenched his jaw, pushing aside the wave of guilt threatening to overwhelm him. He knew Talon had sacrificed himself to ensure the mission's success, but leaving him behind still felt like a betrayal. He tightened his grip on his rifle and kept moving, retracing his path back to the Phoenix. Inside the enemy's lair, the Vakar ship wasn't dead yet, though the pulse devices had disabled its primary weapon systems and caused widespread disruption. The vessel's secondary systems were already beginning to reboot. Emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow across the walls, and Kel could hear the sharp metallic clatter of Vakar boots as soldiers regrouped to contain the damage. Kale ducked into a side passage, narrowly avoiding a patrol. He pressed his back against the wall, his heart pounding as the alien voices grew louder. The Vakar were barking orders in their guttural language, and though Kale couldn't understand the words, the urgency in their tone was clear. They knew humans had infiltrated their ship. Kale waited until the patrol passed, then slipped out of the shadows and continued toward the ship's hangar bay. His path was littered with debris from the shockwave, shattered panels, exposed wiring, and the occasional scorch mark from what appeared to be an internal explosion. As he rounded a corner, Kale spotted a group of Vakar technicians working frantically to repair a damaged energy conduit. He froze, debating whether to engage or sneak past. The decision was made for him when one of the aliens turned and locked eyes with him. "Damn it," Kale muttered, raising his rifle. The ensuing firefight was brutal. Kale's reflexes, honed from years of combat training, kept him alive as he dodged plasma bolts and returned fire with precision. He took down two of the technicians before the others scattered, retreating deeper into the ship. Kale didn't waste time pursuing them. Instead, he sprinted toward the hangar bay, knowing the Vakar reinforcements would soon be on his trail. The last transmission. When Kale finally reached the hangar, his heart sank. The Phoenix sat where they had left it, but the area was crawling with Vakar soldiers. Dozens of them surrounded the ship, their weapons trained on the vessel as if expecting another attack. Kale ducked behind a cargo container, surveying the scene. He could see the scorch marks on the ship's hull, a testament to the gauntlet they had run to get here. The Vakar soldiers seemed hesitant, their movements cautious. They didn't fully understand what the Phoenix was capable of, and that uncertainty was Kale's only advantage. His communicator crackled to life, and Kale nearly dropped it in surprise. A faint, distorted voice came through the static. "Kale, do you copy?" "Talon." Kale whispered, his voice a mix of relief and disbelief. "You're alive." "Barely," Talon replied, his voice strained. "I'm still in the core. Took a hit, but I'm holding on. Listen to me. You need to get out of there." Kale glanced at the soldiers surrounding the ship. "That's easier said than done. A hangar swarming with Vakar. I can't take them all on my own." "You won't have to," Talon said. "I've rigged the core with a secondary charge. It'll buy you a window, but you need to be ready to move." Kale's eyes widened. "You're going to blow the core." Talon's chuckle was weak but defiant. "This ship is too dangerous to let it survive. I won't let them use it to destroy Earth. You have to trust me, Kale." Kale's throat tightened. "And what about you?" There was a long pause before Talon replied. "That's not part of the plan." Kale's fists clenched. "No, I'm not leaving without you. There has to be another way." "There isn't," Talon said firmly. "You have a chance to make it out of here. Don't waste it." Before Kale could argue further, the communicator cut out, leaving him with nothing but silence. The explosive escape. Kale's mind raced as he formulated a plan. If Talon was going to detonate the core, he needed to time his escape perfectly. He activated his wrist-mounted holographic interface, accessing the Phoenix's remote systems. The ship's weapons were offline, but its thrusters were operational. "Let's see if we can cause a little chaos," Kale muttered. He activated the ship's thrusters remotely, sending a burst of flame shooting out of the engines. The sudden flare startled the Vakar soldiers, who scattered in confusion. Taking advantage of the distraction, Kale sprinted toward the ship, his movements swift and calculated. The soldiers recovered quickly, their weapons turning toward Kale as he darted through the hangar. Plasma bolts whizzed past him, narrowly missing their mark. Kale dove behind a stack of crates, returning fire to keep the soldiers at bay. "Talon, if you're going to blow that core, now's the time," Kale shouted into his communicator. As if in response, a low rumble shook the entire ship. The lights flickered again, and a deafening alarm blared throughout the hangar. The Vakar soldiers looked around in panic as the tremors grew stronger. Kale seized the opportunity to make his move. He sprinted toward the Phoenix, dodging enemy fire as the ship's boarding ramp lowered to meet him. He leaped onto the ramp and scrambled inside, slamming the controls to seal a hatch behind him. "Engines online," Kale said, his fingers flying across the dashboard. The ship roared to life, and Kale wasted no time launching it out of the hangar. The final sacrifice. As the Phoenix sped away from the mothership, Kale looked back just in time to see the explosion. The core detonated in a brilliant flash of light, tearing through the Vakar vessel from within. The ship's massive structure buckled and collapsed, its pieces scattering into the void. Kale's heart sank as he realized the full weight of what had just happened. Talon had stayed behind to ensure the mission's success, sacrificing himself to save humanity. A voice crackled through the ship's speakers, faint but unmistakable. "Kale, you did good," Talon said, his tone filled with both pride and finality. "Don't stop fighting. Earth needs you." Then, silence. Kale slumped in his seat, his hands trembling. The mission was over, but the cost was almost too much to bear. As he set course for Earth, Kale made a silent vow. Talon's sacrifice would not be in vain. The fight wasn't over, and Kale would ensure that humanity had a future worth fighting for. A shattered victory. The explosion of the Vakar mothership was visible for light years, a brilliant burst of energy that consumed its once imposing form. From the cockpit of the Phoenix, Kale stared at the scene, his emotions a chaotic storm of triumph and devastation. Talon's last words echoed in his mind like a haunting refrain. "Don't stop fighting. Earth needs you." But what kind of victory was this? Kale gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white. They had stopped the immediate threat, but at what cost? Talon was gone, and Kale was left alone to shoulder the weight of a shattered mission. A silent return. The journey back to Earth felt like an eternity. The once bustling Phoenix now felt hollow, its silence amplifying Kale's grief. Every step he took through the ship's corridors reminded him of Talon's absence. The seat where Talon would sit, constantly throwing out dry humor to ease the tension, was now empty. Kale found himself in the crew quarters, standing before Talon's bunk. On the small metal shelf above the bed was a framed photograph, a rare relic in their digital age. It showed Talon and his family, smiling on a sunlit day by the shores of Lake Seraphim. His daughter, barely 6 years old in the photo, clung to his leg with a gap-toothed grin. Kale picked up the frame, his thumb brushing over the glass. "I'm sorry, Talon," he whispered. "I couldn't bring you back." He placed the photo back on the shelf with trembling hands and left the quarters, unable to linger in the weight of his memories. Earth's reaction. When the Phoenix entered Earth's atmosphere, Kale's comm system lit up with urgent transmissions. He had expected the chaos, the shock of the Vakar mothership's destruction, but the sheer scale of Earth's response caught him off guard. "This is ground control. Phoenix, please confirm your status. We've lost contact with your team. What's your situation?" Kale hesitated, his throat dry. How could he sum up what had happened? Finally, he pressed the comm button. "This is Cal, Ryder. The Vakar mothership has been destroyed. The mission was successful." His voice wavered as he added, "I'm the only survivor." A long silence followed his words, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's engines. Then, ground control's voice returned, softer this time. "Understood, Ryder. We're standing by for your landing." The descent was smooth, but Kel's heart grew heavier with each passing second. When the ship finally touched down at Earth Command's airfield, he was met by a throng of officials, scientists, and soldiers. They surrounded the ship, their faces a mix of relief and apprehension. Kale stepped off the ramp, his boots hitting the tarmac with a dull thud. The murmurs of the crowd quieted as they took in his weary, battle-worn appearance. General Everson, the mission's overseer, approached him with a grave expression. "Ryder," the general said, his voice steady, "you've done humanity a great service today. The Vakar have been dealt a critical blow." Kale met the general's gaze, his own eyes hollow. Talon sacrificed himself for this. He detonated the core to ensure the ship's destruction. Everson nodded solemnly. "He'll be remembered as a hero." But Kale shook his head. "Remembering him isn't enough. We need to be ready for what comes next. The hidden threat." As Earth celebrated the destruction of the Vakar mothership, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that their victory was temporary. The Vakar were not a species to be so easily defeated. The mothership's loss would enrage them, and Kale knew they would retaliate with even greater ferocity. His suspicions were confirmed when Earth Command's intelligence team began analyzing the data retrieved from the mothership. Among the files Talon had managed to transmit before his death was a chilling discovery. The Vakar had not been acting alone. "Ryder, you need to see this," Dr. Ilara Voss, the lead scientist on the project, said as she pulled up a holographic projection in the briefing room. The room was dimly lit, the blue glow of the projection casting shadows on the faces of the gathered officials. The projection showed a map of the galaxy, marked with dozens of red points. "These are Vakar strongholds," Voss explained. But here, she highlighted a cluster of points on the outskirts of the galaxy, far from any known Vakar territory. This is something else entirely. It appears to be an alliance of alien species. Kale frowned, leaning forward. An alliance? You're saying the Vakar have allies? Voss nodded grimly. Yes, and based on the data, this alliance is preparing for a large-scale invasion. The mothership we destroyed was just the beginning. A test run. The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled over them. General Everson was the first to speak. How much time do we have? Voss hesitated. It's hard to say. Months, maybe less. But one thing is clear. We're not just dealing with the Vakar anymore. This is an intergalactic coalition. Cal's mind raced. The thought of facing not just the Vakar, but an entire alliance of alien species was almost too much to comprehend. Earth was already stretched thin from decades of conflict. How could they possibly survive what was coming? A call to action. Despite the overwhelming odds, Cal knew they couldn't afford to falter. Humanity had faced extinction before and emerged stronger. This time would be no different. We need to unify, Cal said, his voice cutting through the tension. Not just Earth, but every colony, every outpost. If we're going to stand a chance, we need to fight as one. Everson nodded. Agreed. I'll start reaching out to the colonies and our allies in the outer systems. We'll need every resource we can muster. Cal turned to Voss. And the data Talon sent, can we use it to develop countermeasures? Voss's eyes lit with determination. Absolutely. There's a treasure trove of information in those files. With time, we can develop new weapons, defenses, maybe even a way to strike first. Cal's heart ached at the mention of Talon's name, but he pushed the pain aside. His friend's sacrifice had given them a fighting chance, and Cal would do everything in his power to honor that. The weight of leadership. In the days that followed, Cal found himself thrust into a new role. No longer just a soldier, he became a symbol of resistance, a rallying point for humanity's fight against the coming invasion. He gave speeches to inspire the troops, oversaw training programs, and worked closely with scientists like Voss to develop strategies for the battles ahead. But beneath the surface, he struggled with the immense pressure and the lingering grief for Talon. One night, as Cal sat alone in his quarters, staring out at the stars, he heard a knock at the door. It was Voss. "You're carrying too much on your shoulders," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "You don't have to do this alone." Cal sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's hard not to feel like I do. Talon trusted me to carry this forward. I can't let him down." "You won't," Voss said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "But you have a team now. Let us help you." Cal nodded, a faint smile breaking through his exhaustion. For the first time since the mission, he allowed himself to hope. They had a long, perilous road ahead, but they weren't walking it alone. As Cal gazed out at the stars, he made a silent vow. They would be ready for whatever came next. Humanity had been underestimated before, but this time they would prove their resilience and their determination to survive. The Alliance strikes. A new dawn. The days turned into weeks, and humanity's preparations for the coming invasion took shape. Earth's surface and orbital stations buzzed with activity as every corner of the planet worked in unison. Factories churned out advanced weaponry, shipyards produced state-of-the-art warships, and recruitment centers overflowed with volunteers, civilians and veterans alike, ready to defend their home. It was a sight Cal had never thought he'd see. Unity on a global scale. Cal stood on the observation deck of Earth Command's central orbital station, gazing down at the planet below. The once divided nations were now acting as one, putting aside centuries of conflict for the sake of survival. Talon's sacrifice had lit a fire in humanity, one that Cal hoped would burn long enough to see them through the storm. Still, the looming threat of the Vakar Alliance was a dark shadow over their progress. The intelligence retreat from the destroyed mothership painted a grim picture. This was not just an alliance of convenience. It was a well-coordinated coalition of alien species, each bringing unique strengths to the battlefield. Worse, their numbers dwarfed humanity's forces. Kale turned as the door behind him hissed open. Dr. Ilara Voss stepped in, carrying a datapad and wearing an expression that could only be described as determined. "I've got something," she said, walking up to him. "You need to see this." Kale raised an eyebrow. "Good news, I hope." "That depends on your perspective," Voss replied, handing him the pad. "We've deciphered more of the Vakar data. They're moving faster than we anticipated. Their fleet will reach our solar system in 3 weeks. Cal's stomach tightened. 3 weeks. That's barely enough time. Voss nodded. "I know. But there's something else. We've pinpointed a critical weakness in their strategy. A key relay station they're using to coordinate their forces. If we take it out, it'll disrupt their communications and buy us time." Kale studied the data, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Where's the relay station?" Voss tapped a point on the map. "It's deep in uncharted space, guarded by a smaller fleet. It's risky, but a surgical strike could cripple their operations." Kale straightened, determination hardening his features. "Then we have no choice. Assemble a team. I'll lead the mission. The infiltration mission." The Phoenix II, Earth's most advanced stealth ship, departed the solar system under the cover of darkness. It carried a small, elite crew handpicked by Kale himself. Each member had proven their mettle in the fight against the Vakar, and Kale trusted them with his life. The journey to the relay station was fraught with danger. Vakar patrols roamed the uncharted regions, and the crew had to rely on the ship's cutting-edge cloaking technology to avoid detection. Every moment felt like walking a razor's edge, the tension palpable in the confined quarters of the ship. When they finally reached the relay station, the sight was both awe-inspiring and intimidating. The station was massive, a sprawling web of interconnected modules floating in the void, surrounded by a protective fleet of Vakar warships. Its pulsating energy core was the lifeline of the Vakar Alliance's operations, a single point of vulnerability in an otherwise impenetrable war machine. Kale gathered his team in the briefing room, the holographic projection of the station hovering between them. "Our objective is the energy core," he began, his voice steady. "We plant the charges, take out the core, and get out before their fleet has a chance to respond. This isn't just about buying time. It's about sending a message. We're not afraid to strike back." The team nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They knew the odds, but they also knew what was at stake. Chaos unleashed. The infiltration was a masterclass in precision. Using the ship's cloaking device, the team slipped past the outer defenses and docked at a maintenance hatch. Moving through the labyrinthine corridors of the station, they avoided patrols and security drones, their every step a calculated risk. Kale led the charge, his mind laser-focused. Talon's voice echoed in his thoughts, urging him forward. This mission wasn't just about survival. It was about ensuring that Talon's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. When they reached the energy core, the room was bathed in an eerie blue glow. The core pulsed with raw power, its energy tendrils snaking through the walls like veins. Voss, who had insisted on joining the mission, began setting the charges with practiced efficiency. "We've got 10 minutes once these go live," she said, her voice calm despite the tension. "Plenty of time to get out." Kale nodded, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of trouble. But trouble found them first. The sound of boots echoed down the corridor, followed by the unmistakable hum of Vakar weapons. Kale's heart sank as an alarm blared through the station. "They know we're here," one of the soldiers shouted. Kale drew his weapon. "Hold them off." "Voss, finish the charges." The room erupted into chaos as Vakar soldiers stormed in. Blasts of energy lit up the space, and the air filled with the deafening sounds of combat. Kale fought with everything he had, his movements fueled by adrenaline and sheer determination. "Charges set," Voss yelled. "We need to move." Kale fired a final shot, taking down a Vakar soldier, and turned to his team. "Fall back. Now." The sacrifice. The team raced through the station, the countdown ticking in their ears. Vakar forces pursued them relentlessly, their numbers overwhelming. One by one, the team members fell, their sacrifices buying precious seconds for the mission's success. When they finally reached the docking bay, only Kale and Voss remained. The ship's engines roared to life as they boarded, the station trembling with the impending explosion. But as the ship pulled away, Kale realized Voss wasn't behind him. He turned, his heart sinking as he saw her still on the ramp, holding a detonator. "Ilara, what are you doing?" he shouted. She met his gaze, her expression resolute. "The Vakar have activated a failsafe. The charges won't detonate remotely. Someone has to stay." "No." Kale stepped forward, but Voss raised a hand, stopping him. "This is what we signed up for," she said, her voice steady. "Go, Kale. Humanity needs you." Before he could protest, she hit the button to close the ramp. The last thing he saw was her smile as the ship sped away. Moments later, the station erupted in a blinding explosion, the shockwave rattling the Phoenix Eye as it fled the scene. A new hope. When Kale returned to Earth, he was hailed as a hero once more. The destruction of the relay station had dealt a critical blow to the Vakar Alliance, buying humanity the time it so desperately needed. But Kale felt no triumph, only the weight of the lives lost. Talon, Voss, and the countless others who had sacrificed everything for the cause. They were the true heroes. As Earth prepared for the battles yet to come, Kale stood as a symbol of resilience and determination. The road ahead was long and fraught with danger, but humanity had proven one thing: they would not go quietly into the night. And as Kale looked to the stars, he made a silent vow. They would fight, they would endure, and they would prevail. Together.